My spoiled and entitled younger sister slept with my older sister's boyfriend. So, we gave her a harsh reality check and slowly ruined her life. If you think you've seen it all, this story will definitely surprise you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on other Reddit stories. Let's get into the story. After my older sister, Maya, cut off all ties with Sally for sleeping with her boyfriend, there was a lot of tension in the family. Of course, Sally, the golden child with no shame, kept dating Maya's ex. Maya had a really hard time at first and called me daily for months just to vent. During that time, we grew very close and supported each other a lot. Eventually, Maya got over it. She met an amazing guy who understood her past trauma and treated her like a princess. They got married, and I was the maid of honor at her wedding. She even invited our parents, despite the fact that they had allowed what Sally did years before. My parents didn't attend. However, a few years later, my parents eventually approached Maya, begging her to reconcile with them. This is where all the chaos began. Maya agreed to reconcile and went to dinner with her husband, Adam. Sally was also present with her husband, Maya's ex. During the evening, I noticed Sally trying to get close to Adam and flirt with him, but he brushed her off. When it was time for dinner, my parents made a toast. Suddenly, Sally stood up and said she was very lucky to be there and almost died when she was young. She then turned to Maya and said, "Sister, I know it must be hard for you because your ex is now my husband, but thank you for your blessing. I know it must be hard for you to be here, knowing how tough it was to compete with me, but I applaud your bravery." This was the moment when Sally received the biggest lesson of her life. Maya's husband, Adam, a former Marine, stood up and yelled at Sally, asking how she dared insult his wife, and then he destroyed her with his words. He shouted, "Do you think you're so special just because you were a miracle baby? You know what? I was a miracle baby too, but I don't go around bragging about it like you do. You're so pathetic that the only achievement in your life was something accidental. What else do you have to show? Everything you have, you basically borrowed from my wife. Even your pathetic husband, who spent the whole night flirting with all the cousins in this room. You're so annoying that not even your husband can stand you. Do you know the truth? You have nothing, and you are nothing. You're so shameless and pathetic that you try to flirt with me. You already got her ex, and now you want her husband. I would rather die than be with a woman like you, whose worth is less than a paper bag. You've always been jealous of my wife because you always knew you would never be as amazing as she is. That's why you stole from her, because that was the only way you could have what she has. Nobody wants you, and nobody loves you. How does it feel knowing that you're going to die alone? It's nice, right? Do you sleep well at night, knowing that there's not a single person in the world who would take a bullet for you? Nobody cares about you." Sally ended up crying. My parents and the other relatives were in shock. My parents asked Maya, "Aren't you going to do anything?" Maya replied, "No," and left with her husband. Honestly, even my cousins were silent. I knew nobody liked Sally. I, on the other hand, was laughing behind my wine glass. Saying that a big fight broke out would be an understatement. My parents were furious. My mom, a bit more than my dad, was pacing around the house, crying and hugging Sally as much as she could while mumbling how much she hated Adam for what he had just done. Sally's husband actually kept his distance from her, trying to make conversation with me, which only confirmed what a creep he was. A few days later, I went to see Maya and her husband. I talked to her and asked if she was okay. She said she was, but that mom and dad had been demanding that they apologize to Sally. According to them, everything Adam said was extremely hurtful and had completely destroyed Sally's self-esteem to the point of having suicidal thoughts. According to them, Sally said she would take her own life unless Maya and Adam apologized to her, and best of all, also paid her and her husband for the emotional trauma that all of this had caused them. Maya apparently laughed out loud before blocking them. Why? Why should they apologize for telling the truth? Much less pay Sally a single penny. If anything, Sally should reimburse us all for the years of emotional trauma she caused us. Maya and Adam also received support from the family. Many of our cousins' parents were not aware of Sally's incident or all the harassment. They thought that because Sally was a miracle baby, she would be an angel. I apologized to Adam for what happened. He also apologized, saying he lost control. He also had very toxic parents and basically projected his own anger onto Sally. I told him it was fine. Even our cousins loved what he did. They're mocking Sally, and he's practically their hero right now. As for my parents, they were still in denial. A few days later, Adam called me asking to talk, so I met up with him at his house. He made an excuse to Maya and took me to a private place. He pulled out his phone and told me that Sally hadn't stopped texting him. He had been ignoring her. He had already blocked 3 of her accounts. Sally's messages varied between apologies, pleased to talk, criticisms, calling Adam unworthy, dirty messages, and even some provocative photos with captions like, "I can do better than Maya." Did you know that? Adam was fed up, and I was furious. Sally has no shame. I said enough was enough. My parents needed to see what kind of person Sally really was, so I arranged a meeting with them. But we didn't tell Maya anything because she was pregnant, and the last thing she needed was for Sally to become a big problem again. The following week, we sat down with my parents, and as soon as Adam saw Sally, he lashed out at her again. This time, it wasn't as brutal, and in fact, he managed to stop before she shed a single tear, though it was close. I told my parents they needed to control their miracle child because she was acting crazy. She had been sending inappropriate messages to Adam. Of course, my parents didn't believe it. I showed them the evidence, but they acted like it wasn't real. Sally kept saying it was a fake account, that someone was trying to defame her. The idiot of a husband she has, whom I call Dutch of Akmatch, forcibly took her phone and found the messages. He was screaming and yelling at Sally. She curled up into a ball, crying and unable to defend herself because she had been caught. Dutch of Akmatch looked at our parents and said, "You've raised a pathetic liar." The fact that he, of all people, had the guts to say something to Sally proved she had really crossed a line, one that even for her was low. I personally chewed out my parents like they were roasted chickens. I told them they were failures. They have always prioritized their golden child over the other kids. Where was their concern when their other daughter was betrayed? Would they have done the same if Sally's boyfriend had cheated on her with Maya? They've spoiled Sally so much that she has become an entitled brat. They should know that almost the entire family hates her and is sick of her. Everyone has started to hate them too, because they've made Sally more important than any of us. And now it has come back to bite them. Adam told them they should be ashamed of the brat they raised, that they are bad parents, that they failed to teach morality to their daughter. That's why she's after her sister. And he said, "Look at her. Can you honestly say you're proud of your daughter? Are you proud that she's a homewrecker? Are you proud that no one wants her?" My parents didn't say a word. Finally, I told them to go to hell. Maya and I are going to cut all ties with them. Don't even bother calling us. They've invested their entire life in their spoiled brat, so let them ask her for help when they're old. I'm done with them. That's when my mom started crying, saying it wasn't fair, that the whole family was abandoning them. I looked at them and asked, "And whose fault is that?" My dad was practically defeated. I'm sure other family members also confronted them and threatened to cut them off because of Sally. 6 months after this, Sally got herself into quite a bit of trouble again. This time, however, since she had no one else to terrorize, she turned her attention toward our parents. My mom was still busy pampering Sally, but I felt like my dad had started to notice the behaviors that led Sally to be the way she is. Basically, my dad began to get angrier and angrier with Sally, and over time, he started to learn to say no to her. As for my mom, she was so absorbed in Sally, her golden child who never does anything wrong, that she didn't realize that hundreds of dollars in cash had started to disappear from her purse. Suddenly, Sally began showing up at the house with new things, watches, shoes. And when asked where she got the money, she made up a lie about applying for a government scholarship and getting it. Of course, my mother believed that lie instantly, but my father was a bit suspicious. It took him a while to fully believe that his own daughter was stealing from him, but when he did, he decided he needed to test his theory. He bought a camera and installed it in his room. The next time Sally showed up at the house with new things, he secretly checked the recordings. He found Sally taking what appeared to be $100 from my mother's purse. He confronted her about it, and the crocodile tears started. She apologized, promised never to do it again, said she felt really guilty but desperately needed that new makeup palette. After much back and forth between them and my mom staying on the sidelines, my dad decided to kick Sally out of the house. Of course, Sally wasn't going to take this lying down, so she protested, and my dad had to physically drag her, along with her belongings, out of the house. Sally desperately tried to call my mom, but my mom was heartbroken over the betrayal she had suffered. Apparently, she told Sally something like, "After everything we did for you, we ruined our relationship with everyone for you. We were stupid. Now I regret it. I don't want to see you again." And that's how Sally ended up on the street. She called both Maya and me, and even tried to camp out by Maya's door overnight until Maya called the police. When she called me, I just laughed and hung up the phone. I didn't want, and I still don't want, to have anything to do with her. My dad called me after all of this, begging for reconciliation. He told me everything that happened, and I can't help but feel almost bad for everything they've been through. My parents have lost everything, And although it's entirely their fault and they should be held accountable for their actions, at the end of the day, they're my parents, and I want them to be happy in life. Despite everything they put me and Maya through, I know that at least they have each other and are on the path to repairing their relationship. Did you enjoy this story? Leave your opinion in the comments. And remember that these stories are taken from foreign Reddits and may be incomplete due to a lack of updates from the creator. And some words may be out of context due to the translation. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.